I've never liked the quiet. You know, those moments when everything goes still, too still. You hear every tick of the clock, every rustle of someone's backpack. It makes you feel like you're the only one left in the world, even if the room is full of people. That's what it felt like during the last week of the semester. Final exams had turned the whole campus into a ghost town. Even the cafeteria was dead quiet, with everyone cramming, drowning in notes and coffee. I don't know why I wasn't more prepared. I had weeks to study, but between working late shifts and trying to balance 2 part-time jobs, studying had become more of a luxury. So here I was, the night before my final exam for Psych 305, trying to cram everything I could into my head. The thing is, our professor, Dr. Daniels, had been dropping hints all semester that his final exam wasn't going to be like the others. He kept saying things like, "It's not just about what you know, it's about how you think." At first, we all brushed it off. Daniels loved his little mind games, so most of us assumed it was just him trying to scare us. But then, the emails started. A week before the final, he sent us a weird email. It said, "The exam will test your limits, mentally and emotionally. Be prepared to go beyond the textbook. That's it. No study guide, no clarification, just that cryptic message." By the time the day of the test rolled around, the anxiety in the class was through the roof. I was feeling it too. Even though I'd barely slept, I dragged myself to the exam room. There's something about walking into a quiet, nearly empty building on campus that just messes with your head. It was 8 a.m., but the hallways were still and cold, like no one had been there for hours. I could hear my footsteps echoing, and it made me more nervous than I already was. When I got to the classroom, I was one of the last ones to arrive. Most of the class was already seated, all of them staring at the thick packet of papers in front of them. Dr. Daniels was at the front of the room, leaning against his desk like he'd been waiting for this moment all semester. He didn't say much, just a quick, "You have 2 hours. No talking, no phones, no leaving the room." Then he locked the door. It felt like a prison sentence. The first page of the exam was a killer. Right away, the questions were vague, open-ended. They weren't about the material we'd studied. Instead, it was stuff like, what would you change about the way you think? Or if given the opportunity, how would you test the limits of your own mind? I glanced around the room, and it was clear that no one was ready for this. People were shifting in their seats, flipping through the pages like they were trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Just page after page of these odd psychological questions. It felt less like a test and more like some kind of psychological experiment, like Daniels was trying to get inside our heads. About an hour in, the stress was hitting everyone hard. I mean, imagine sitting in a room full of people, but all you can hear is the scratching of pens on paper. No one was coughing, no one was clearing their throat. It was dead silent, except for the scribbling. It made the room feel smaller, more claustrophobic. You could feel the tension hanging in the air. I remember looking up at one point and seeing Emily, this girl who always sat in the front row, just staring at her paper, her face pale. She wasn't writing anymore. She was just frozen, staring blankly at one of those ridiculous questions. That's when it hit me. We were all starting to crack. It wasn't the content of the exam that was hard. It was the pressure, the way every second felt like it was dragging you closer to some kind of breaking point. I looked down at the next question on my own test. Describe the last time you felt completely isolated. I couldn't write anything. The answer was right now. The room felt like it was closing in on me, like the walls were slowly pressing in. My chest was tight, and I felt this overwhelming urge to get out, just to stand up and leave. But the door was locked, and something about that made the feeling worse. People were starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them were tapping their pencils, others were biting their nails. I even heard someone whisper to themselves under their breath like they were trying to keep it together. But Dr. Daniels just sat there, calm, watching us like a hawk. I wondered if he was enjoying this, seeing how far he could push us. Then came the final question, and I swear it nearly knocked the wind out of me. It wasn't even a question. It just said, write about the moment you realized you couldn't do this anymore. I sat there staring at those words, my hands shaking. This wasn't a test. It was some kind of twisted game, a game to see who would break first. I wanted to stand up, throw the exam on the floor, and storm out. But instead I sat there, frozen. Everyone else was still writing, scratching away at their papers like their lives depended on it. But me, I just stared. With about 10 minutes left, Dr. Daniel stood up and walked over to the door. He unlocked it and said, "You can leave now if you want." Just like that. No explanation, no conclusion, just leave. No one moved. We were all too stunned. But then, one by one, people started to get up, hesitantly, like they weren't sure if this was part of the test too. I grabbed my backpack, slid my exam into the pile, and walked out with the others. The air outside the classroom felt different, like I had escaped something dangerous. That was the last time I saw Dr. Daniels. He never showed up for the final class, and when grades came out, no one even talked about the exam. It was like the whole thing never happened. A few students dropped the course entirely. Emily? She transferred schools the next semester. I passed the class, but I'll never forget that feeling, that overwhelming, suffocating pressure. It wasn't about the questions, it was about what he did to us. He got inside our heads, and I think that was the real test.